Okay. Good to go?
Yep.
Okay. So thanks for coming out, everyone. My name is Leah. I am a front-end Drupal developer at the Jive. And this is?
Joel Patet. And I'm just a freelance developer, designer, programmer, something or other, Drupal person. And yeah, I'm also like a Drupal 8 theme system co-maintainer, so I was helping get it out, and mostly the Twig part of it. Yeah.
So I guess with both of us up here, you kind of get Joel, who is more involved in the process of bringing it in to bringing Twig into Drupal. Still deals with it every day, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then me, who's more of a, I guess, an implementer on a daily basis. So you get to see a taste of both worlds as why things happened and how you're going to do things when this moves forward. So here's just a brief overview of what we'll be covering. So we'll go over the pipeline changes. So meaning when the Drupal bootstrap goes through, what's it processing at what times. The file changes, directory changes, all that simple stuff you've probably seen before, so we'll kind of go through that pretty quickly. The concept of base themes is probably new to most people. When you create a new theme, you'll be basing it on one of those three options there. How we've evolved from PHP template to Twig, and the concept of libraries being a part of a theme. This is another new concept with the implementation, and it's not to kind of be confused of the libraries module that we've already worked with in 7. Some new default blocks are going to be in Drupal core. Theme hooks and new ways to do template suggestions. You're going to see a lot less hooks, a lot more templates. And the introduction of smacks and BEM for better folder structure and naming conventions. Go through debug and auto-escaping as well, which will help you as you're troubleshooting and developing new themes.
And we're going to be showing you like a before and after. So if you're coming from the Drupal 7 world, we'll show you the before and after for most of the things that we're talking about, just so you kind of get a feel for how things will be changing in your head, and you can see them side by side, and you can kind of visually see those things. And these are the conventions we're using for everything in there. So if it says theme uppercase or module uppercase or hook uppercase, we're going to be using those in replace for your own thing. So your own theme, your own module, your own hook, or somebody else's module. So yeah. The pipeline. We're basically in Drupal 7 we had your module defined the theme hook, the template, and same thing in Drupal 8. And the build stage actually is the same. The only difference that you'll see there is you might have been building it in like a hook menu, and there's no hook menus in Drupal 8. They're in controller actions. I think that's actually called build. Most of the controller's actions are called build in Drupal 8, so that's help you kind of see where that's coming from. So we're defining what our template is going to be, and then we're going to put stuff into that new template, some variables, and we're going to modify those variables before they hit the template. And in Drupal 7, we have this layer called the process layer. So we have pre-process and process. And process, people were not really understanding what those were and what they were doing. And essentially the process layer was flattening your variables. So you'd have an array of some sort, and it's basically just flattening it and that variable becomes a string when it hits the template. Sometimes they weren't flattened, and you'd have it in an array in a template, and you'd be running Drupal render in your template. We got away with removing that because we made the Twig template smarter by if you try to print an array in Twig, it will think it's a render array, and it will render it for you. So you never have to think about that part. So that was removed. The only thing we added there was a theme hook suggestions. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So you can actually alter those suggestions. And you can actually see here that in the build stage, you can either call the theme function or you can make a render array with the hash theme. In Drupal 8, we're only doing the hash theme. And in the markups, we had template for theme underscore hook. So like, I'll show that later. We only have the one thing. So we kind of simplified it a little bit. One way to do things, a little bit easier to follow.
So next we'll kind of go over the file changes. So the first thing you're going to see when you download Drupal 8 is the directory is totally different. You're going to see that all of the stuff that actually is core is in a core folder now, which is nice. So when people say don't hack core, you actually know what's involved there. So you're going to be putting your custom developed themes directly into that theme folder in the root. And then the sites folder is only in Drupal 8 is only used if you're doing like a multi-site environment. Otherwise, you'll probably just leave that one alone as well. Then there's the file changes associated with the theme. So the theme.info file, which is where you call your style sheets and define your regions, all that stuff, is now themeinfo.yaml. So you're going to see the YAML syntax a little later to show you what that looks like. Template.php, where all your hooks and alters and all that went. You're going to actually see less of a need for that, but when you do need to put in some custom hooks and stuff, that will be in theme.theme. And again, the capital theme being your theme name. And then the template syntax is, instead of being tpl.php, you're going to be html.twig. And we'll go over how that affects the markup to put in those files as well. And then there's actually one new one that's a critical part of the theme, and that's the theme.libraries.yaml. And this we will go into a little bit more in a little bit. So here's an example of the info file. You've got Drupal 7 on the left there and the Drupal 8 YAML file on the right. So you're going to see, you basically got to learn a new syntax. It's not going to be not like writing a new language or anything. So just formatting it a little differently and defining your regions and your style sheets. When you do see the style sheets and the scripts, that's where it's going to start to look a little different for you guys, because you're not actually calling your individual style sheets and scripts right there. You're going to actually be calling what are called libraries. And that's kind of where that libraries file comes in. And we will go over that a little bit later.
So our base themes. So we created a bunch of base themes, and we have different reasons for different parts of it. But Start still exists. We tried to get rid of it, but I don't know, some people wanted to keep it. So Start still exists. We introduced a couple of new ones. So 7 exists, just upgraded a lot in Drupal 8. The Bartik is also just updated with some HTML5 type stuff and some style changes. But they both extend from classy. And so what we did is this classy base theme is where Drupal always provided you with some opinionated classes for things. We still provide you with those, but we try to rip them out of core. So actually Drupal core is, we tried as much as, we didn't get them all, but we got them most. We ripped out as many classes as we possibly could out of core. And then we also added this stable one in there because we wanted to give you something. If you're a base theme maintainer, like say you're building the next Bootstrap theme for your base themes for everybody else, undoing all those classes was annoying in Drupal 7. So we wanted to give you something without having to remove it first, then add your stuff. You get something that's clean and removed of markup and classes already. And that's what stable is, but it's also, stable is API stable in the fact that it doesn't change during the life cycle of Drupal, so you can kind of rely on both stable and classy are API level, so they don't change. We will likely change Bartik if we think there's something cool that we can do to it, and if you are using Bartik for your site for some reason, then you can you can get the fancy new features that we give you that from that one. So that one's not an API thing. We don't want you to extend from that one, but we do want you to extend from classy and stable. And if you want to go crazy, you can turn base theme to false, and you're getting whatever core is providing. And that's like, we might be changing that willy-nilly, and you have to make the changes as they come. So that one can be scary unless you're really anal about wanting to see the latest, and you're going to update with core and all that kind of thing. But stable will actually stay the same. We've copied all the templates into stable. So it has a copy of everything that was in core when it was released. So that's how we kind of.
And I'll just go back quickly to the. Oh, it's not here.
Oh, I probably took it.
Okay. You will define your base theme in your YAML file.
You don't have to. But
you don't have to. If you don't define it, you default to stable, or is it classy?
Stable.
Stable, right? Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, this is what base theme it will look like in your YAML file. It'll say base theme, and then false is actually how Stark and basically Stark gives you a peek at what's under the hood. And so if you wanted to see what's under the hood and see nothing, then you get base theme false. And then the next one is the default, which is stable, and that one allows you to opt out of the classiness, and that's if you're trying to avoid. If you want to do all the classes and all the styles for everything, that's what we would use, and then you don't have to rely on it, or you can rely on it; it won't change. And then Bartik and 7 are both on classy, and therefore. Basically, those are if you want to have the opinionated stuff, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel, or you're not a base, you're not a framework of some sort, like a CSS framework of some sort. So, yeah. And templates. We have a new syntax, new templating system, and everything's named HTML.twig. So whatever your thing was called, before it was called. Node.tbl.php is going to be called node.html.twig. And field, same thing. And then hook theme is the exact same thing. Actually, in Drupal 7, you can actually use a template file for every single thing that was a hook. So in this example next is system messages. And we just did that for you. So they're all going to be Twig templates. Every single thing that's markup is in Twig. No more concatenation of strings inside of a function. We tried to keep the markup in the template file so that your editors can do stuff with it. Yeah.
And that's where the reduced need for code in template.php comes from, because you're not constantly writing hooks to alter, like system messages is one of them. I think I remember doing a lot, or what's another one?
Item list.
Yeah.
Links.
Or pagers. Yeah, pagers. Yeah. So next, I'll just kind of go over the Twig syntax. So we have the PHP template on the Drupal 7 side there, and then the Twig on the right for Drupal 8. So you'll see basically you have your two mustache brackets that would be the equivalent of, I guess, print render or rendering a string. You have your mustache with percentage sign for all your operations, so your ifs, your else ifs, and all that stuff. The bracket hashtag for comments instead of the slash and asterisk. And then you have filters, which are a way to kind of, in the Twig example on the right-hand side, you'll see something's getting changed to uppercase there.
String upper.
Yeah, string upper. So that's like you have a string, and then you kind of want to do something to it as well. This is how you would translate something as well. You would have like pipe T, and that's kind of like the equivalent of wrapping it in T tags to make it available to translation. And then there's a few more. So those are the basic ones, probably the ones you'll be using all the time. And then two additional ones are is it tilde?
Tilde, yeah.
Tilde, which is used for concatenation. So that's the equivalent of using like a dot in PHP or the plus sign in JavaScript, just something to bring your strings together. And then the white space control is a way to strip white space from the beginning and end of your string. So instead of using a trim function or whatever else we used to use in PHP.
Regular expressions.
Regular expressions. And I know this probably isn't going to be too legible. Actually, it's not legible at all. But this is just kind of something to show you, like, on the right-hand side, we have an item list being rendered in PHP template, and then the exact same rendering how Twig lets you output that. So a lot less code.
Syntax highlighting actually works.
Yeah. So
that's item list, theme item list.
Yeah. So all over good.
Can you go into the array like item.attributes.title or something? Do you need to like
in which
like you do the for item in items? It's like title is part of that.
Yeah, you can go items dot. Yeah.
Item dot. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I don't. You go over that later, I think.
You can also, but if it's an array of items, then you actually have to go like item.0 or item.1 because it could be multiple.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. But yeah, you can.
But no more UND, which is nice, right?
Yeah, no more und.
Or language none.
The languages stuff knows, like all the entities are, when they're sent to the template, they or even the fields, they know what language they are, so you don't have to do anything for that part, and it's a lot more fancy that way too. Yeah. It's just great. So attributes. Not everybody. How many people have used Drupal _ attributes function in Drupal 7? One developer. Yeah. It's there. A lot of people. It was a big mix and mash of what people were using for that. It usually takes an array, and that's the array that it'll take in. So checked equals checked. ID equals stop. And the only difference that actually gets, like, this is the actual result that gets done. The only difference is that in Drupal 7, because it's HTML4 XHTML, it says checked equals checked. There's no concept of Boolean attributes in Drupal 7. Tested it out while I was trying to get the output for this slide. But if you say true, in Drupal 8, it will be Boolean and it'll say checked, or it just won't show up. That's how HTML5 works for that attribute. So these, we tried to kind of consolidate what we were doing with attributes a little bit into like a smart object that can print itself. And we can do some fancy things with it. So you'll see on this side, we are saying print attributes. Not just, it's the object itself prints all the attributes and puts the space in the front of each one of them. And you can actually, it has methods on it, like add class, remove class, set attributes. I think there's also a remove attributes. Those are like jQuery functions. They do the same thing as what the jQuery functions do. They merge your classes, they add extra stuff and remove stuff. So that way you can manipulate that object. If you wanted to merge stuff in Drupal 7, that's what you get. You get a bunch of array stuff and you do array merge and you pass that anything into Drupal attributes and print it out. It's a little bit kind of all over the map for that kind of stuff. And everybody was doing it differently. Hopefully, I don't expect everybody's going to be doing it the same way in Drupal 8 too, but hopefully they might like it a little bit more and they might try to do that. But like in Drupal 7, I saw people making a classes thing and then concatenating spaces on the front of every single class that they were going to add to that thing and then printing that in the template. I saw that a lot. Views does that. I remember because I removed it from Views. So, yeah. And there's a couple of do's and don'ts. I saw this a lot, and I'm sure it's going to continue to happen. People put a space in there because they're scared that it will bump up against the thing. It puts a space on every single attribute that needs to print out. You don't have to worry about that. Don't put the space in the front or the back. It'll do it for you. So then you don't get the output at the bottom is what you'll get, and that's what you'll get at the top if there was no attributes inside that object. If there is, then it'll put the spaces that it needs. You can actually remove, so class attributes.class is actually printing the value, and inside of the top there, I'm actually removing that from the original attributes and printing the rest. So I'm saying print without the class and then print it separately inside there. That way I could do some other fancy things. You probably don't need to do that. If you really want to do that, I would just say like attributes.add class and add whatever class you wanted to do. I don't know if you're particular about the order that they're printing out. That's one way you can get the order the way that you want to if you always wanted the class to do this to start. So for the super anal, you can do that. Or add extra things on the end, which is the ID one, where I'm adding hyphen more to the ID name. If you do it without, if you do print out the ID without putting it inside of an ID attribute name thing, it'll just print the value right into the thing. It's not really probably what you're intending to do. So yeah, just a couple little gotchas that I've seen people do already.
So now we'll move on to libraries, which we alluded to when we showed you the info.yaml file. And I guess this is conceptually, I guess, the same idea of using a library, the libraries module, and installing a library, but it's definitely it's tied far closer to the theme. So on the Drupal 7 example there, this is how we would call all of our style sheets and JavaScript into our info file. And on the right side, this is how the first example is how we're going to do it in our YAML file. So we're defining our theme's global library, and that's where all of your, I guess, pretty much all your base styles are going to sit. The libraries you want on every single page, because that's how libraries can be used effectively. Is that you can decide which pages get which libraries, or which templates load which libraries. So if you have a JavaScript heavy widget of something and you don't want that JavaScript on every page, this way makes it a lot easier. And we'll go over a little later how we kind of used to do it in Drupal 7 and how we can do it now.
That name is not, that's arbitrary, you made it up, just so you know, and you can put whatever you want.
The global, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, global can be anything.
It's .yaml.
Yeah, so this,
Something .yaml.
so I've kind of just taken a snippet of so on the left side, this is the info, this would be your theme.info. On the right side, this is your theme .info.yaml, that first one, it's a little snippet from there. The second one below is the theme.libraries.yaml. So this is where we're defining our global, and we're saying, we have these style sheets and these JavaScript files that we want on every page. And then we'll go into, I believe, the next slide where we'll talk about, if you have additional libraries that you want to use. So right now, there's several ways we can attach this to on a as-needed basis. We can have the Drupal add library, or we can have a custom module that's adding JavaScript or CSS to a page based on some sort of argument that you provide it. But I always found this challenging because it's like you have this logic as to when CSS and JavaScript is getting applied in a separate module file, and then you have like the JavaScript kind of sitting over here, and it often felt disjointed, and I'm like, okay, so now we got this new object here, and now I got to go back into my module and tell it, oh, I need it on this page as well. So it always felt kind of disjointed and not easy to manage. But in Drupal 7, Drupal 8, what you have, again, in the info.yaml file, you can define additional libraries. And the example here I'm using is like a BX slider, for instance. If you have a slider that you're just applying the JavaScript to an unordered list, you're not necessarily leveraging like a views widget or anything. You want to manually apply it as needed. You could just define another library, and from there load the appropriate CSS and JavaScript. And then you'll also see there under the BX slider is that we're also calling a dependency to Core's jQuery, because jQuery will not be loaded on every page if it's not needed on the theme level. obviously on the admin side, it'll probably be loaded on every page, right?
It's because it's in a dependency.
It's because it's always needed. But on your theme, when a user's visiting your page, if you don't have any need for jQuery on that page, it's not gonna load, which is a nice way to kind of lighten the JavaScript load.
In Drupal 7, if you ever noticed, it also will not show up if you don't have any JavaScript. If you don't have any scripts on your site, jQuery won't load. But as soon as you put one script into your info YAML on a site, it will load. That's how it works in Drupal 7. In Drupal 8, you need to explicitly put it as a dependency, so you can load as much JavaScript as you want. If you don't say a dependency is jQuery, it won't load.
Yes.
So this syntax looks to me like there's redundancy going on. You've got two files. You're defining in your theme info YAML that you're going to have these libraries, theme global and theme BX slider.
Yeah.
And then you're now going to another file.
Yeah.
And you're defining these global and BX slider. So, I mean, generally speaking, when you're trying to deal with programming, the last thing you want is redundancy.
Well, the nice thing is, like, when you put something in the info file, in Drupal 7 this is true as well, it's loaded on every single page, right? And if you're in Drupal 8, you use the library's definitions. The library's YAML is actually just defining what your libraries are, the groupings together of a couple of pieces of JavaScript that go with some CSS and maybe something else. Those things are defined as a group, and then you could have multiple groups, and you're just defining what those are. You don't actually have to load those on every single page, and so there's lots of different ways that you can actually attach those libraries to different things.
I think I'm hearing you, but what I don't understand here is if you've got this theme libraries YAML sitting there, why do you need anything in your theme info YAML telling you you've got libraries where in that libraries file it's telling you?
The reason why we do that is the same in Drupal 7. As soon as you put it inside of that info thing, you're attaching it to every single page. And so that is one way to attach it to every single page. You might not want to be attaching all JavaScript to every single page. You might only need some JavaScript, especially really heavy ones that are expensive for your page load, to be only loaded on the pages that are needed. And putting it inside of your info YAML will be an expensive part of your site. So this allows us to separate them.
So you're actually saying with this implementation, the BX slider library will be loaded on every page?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it
That was
wouldn't
my bad.
necessarily have to appear there.
No. Yeah.
In your theme info file, you might not include it in there if it wasn't being loaded on every page.
Correct. So you wouldn't. So if I'm loading global on every single page, boom, I put it in there. BX slider, I'm only putting it on my home page because that's the only one that actually has a slider on it. So therefore, I'm going to use a different method to attach it, and we can look at those ones in a second.
Just also the libraries.yaml file can be in a module as well. But just this module provides a collection of CSS and JavaScript, but a theme or some other code has to actually make use of it for it to be applied.
And Drupal 7 had libraries as well, but you couldn't define them in the theme, which is annoying. So if you wanted to define these libraries and use them the same way as you were using them in Drupal 8, you actually had to build your own custom module. This one, you can actually define them in the theme, which is something you couldn't do in Drupal 7.
So we define like different library. How do we decide like because this library goes to this page, goes to this place?
That's what she's going to tell you in one of them, and I'll actually show another way in a second.
So I guess the template technique is listed here. So you'd have your node template, your whatever other template. You just have this syntax at the top of the page, and anytime that template gets loaded, all the assets that are associated with that library will get loaded.
So an example for that BX slider, like I was saying with the home page, if I had a node template for a specific, if my home page was a node suggestion, I could actually have a node suggestion template, so it would be called node front, if I remember right, .html. And I could actually attach just the BX slider into that template, and it will only load on the home page.
So
on
if
the
you
page
did that, would you then remove the theme BX slider from the
Yes.
.info file?
Yes,
Okay.
totally. Because then I don't want to load it on every other page.
So
I was unclear about that part.
any library you put in that theme.info gets loaded on every page?
Yes,
Yeah.
just like Drupal 7, just that didn't have libraries in Drupal 7. But for their JavaScript and CSS that were there before, that was on every page. This is the same thing. Your info YAML is an every page type thing.
Right. But if you had other ones that you just wanted to be able to call optionally, you would still put them in theme.libraries?
Yes. Totally.
And then Joelle will continue with the other way to attach assets.
So attached assets. This is in Drupal 7 as well. So that's the Drupal 7 version. I'm just chucking in markup for fun. But you could put it on any type of render array. You can put that in Drupal 7. And that's how you define it. The only kind of big difference here is you had like so many arrays. We still have so many arrays, but one, the syntax changed. You can see square brackets. That's just because we have a requirement on a newer version of PHP which allows those square brackets. It's the same array. It just looks different. And the other big difference is actually you have to have that last array there where it says like system and module and names and then what the library was called. In Drupal, it's just a slash, looks like a directory type thing. So what system was there is core here in this case. There's actually something still in the system module. And then whatever your module's name, library name, your theme's VX slider. So that's one way of attaching it directly to some piece of markup that's going on the page. This is one way you can do it. I do this if I'm attaching the render array and I want to do it this way. But most people, from theming point of view, will probably do it the way that Leah showed just before, where you're actually using the twig. How do I get there? Attached library inside the twig template. Just because it's easier, it feels more natural. You're on the template that you're working with and you want to attach some libraries. That seems the best way to do it to me.
Where does it render?
It bubbles up. So it bubbles up the tree, and then depending on how you set up your library, because you can actually define where your stuff's going to load in the library. So I can actually have it render in the footer. Most things try to render in the footer by default in Drupal 8, which is different from Drupal 7.
So you wouldn't put that into the footer. I mean, if you put that in the footer on that template.
Oh, you don't have to do that. No. It's always doing it on the HTML template.
Yeah.
And it bubbles everything up that you're, so this is on a node template, but it'll bubble everything up to the main template and try to print it there. As long as you didn't delete that variable that says print in the bottom. Just like in Drupal 7 too.
So Joe, would it be safe to say like this technique would maybe more be used by module development?
More module development. But you'll see that as well, so I would just wanted to show you what that looks like and the fact that there's a little bit less arrays, like one less array, I guess, in that. Also, and you might not have used these in Drupal 7, but another way to attach globally across the pages was hook page build and hook page alter. They were removed for some reason or another and just replaced with those 4 other ways to do it. So, yeah. And likely in the theme, I would use the alter one and not the attachment one, just because everything in the theme you're altering something that's happened, that's been done somewhere else. But yeah, you can attach them that way too.
Blocks. So we do have some new default blocks that come in, I guess, pre-configured and ready to go, much like the site powered by Drupal block that's automatically added for Drupal 7. So the first one is a branding block, which kind of puts your site logo and your site name into a nice little container. Right now, pretty much if you're not applying those to your template, you're probably hard coding them into your page.tpl.php. So this gives you a little more power where you can hide it in some and move it around in others instead of being married to it in one spot. The system messages is a block as well, so you'll have better control over where that lands on the page and where it lands on individual pages. And a menu block as well, which is kind of interesting. If you ever use the menu block module, a lot of that configuration is now into core. So you can create menus that and limit them to certain levels deep and
kind of like the menu block module.
Yeah.
Are you saying that if you're say subtheming classy, or the other one that doesn't have the classes, that these things are not written into the template? You have to place a block where you want it to get.
They're all actually not written into the template. We remove those global variables from the templates.
Okay.
So messages, there was a variable called messages in Drupal 7 in page template.
Yeah.
It is not there anymore.
Okay.
It's a block.
Okay.
Menu block was called something like primary underscore
Right, secondary.
links or
Yeah.
whatever. It's a
Yeah.
block as well, so you drag and drop that block wherever the regions are. And the branding block was those three variables that she mentioned there,
Right.
and they are now inside of a block as well, so you can move them around on the page if you want your logo to be in the sidebar. Just drag it
Yeah.
into the sidebar.
Okay, good.
You can still hard code it, obviously, not have it in blocks.
Actually, you can, but
You just ignore the block.
no, not even that. The variables don't exist being passed to the template. You can pass them manually, but we've removed them from the templates just because extra processing if we're not going to use them. But if you really want to, you can do what Block's doing and pass it to a different template. Because there's same settings. They're theme settings. They come from your like appearance page or something like that. Yeah.
So theme hooks.
My favorite slide.
I just like how the hook comes out of the title. So pre-process didn't change, so you don't need to learn a whole new batch of things there. Except you don't have suggestions.
Yeah, there's no. In Drupal 7, you had suggestions being built inside of those if you wanted to. We just took them out of that. We're going to think of naming that something different called Prepare. We might do that in Drupal 9, just to stop confusing with all the changes and stuff. We tried to not do that. I tried to not do that, and other people wanted to do whatever.
So this is how suggestions end up being a little different. And I know the code is kind of squishy here, but you can scroll side to side. On the right-hand side is a custom pre-process that would have been put into template.php. And this example is showing an example where I wanted to have the ability to have a custom block template for a bean type. So if anybody's familiar with the bean module, they let you create blocks that have different fields and all of that stuff. So this hook made this template block-bean type available to me for use. In Drupal 8, we have something a little different with the hook suggestions. This would still be done this would be done in your theme.theme file, because we know template.php evolved into the theme.theme file. The first one at the top there, which doesn't have the alter, that's the one you'd use in modules. So when I first started playing with Drupal 8 and I was trying to address this problem, like, oh, it was theme pre-process block in Drupal 7, it must be hook theme suggestions block in Drupal 8, but it wasn't. So I couldn't get it to work, and then Joelle told me, oh, you need the alter. So the alter is available to both, but if you're doing something in your theme.theme file, that's the one you're going to want to use. So this example here with the alter is showing, because we actually have custom block types into Drupal 8 now, so you don't need to rely on a contrib for something like that. If you create a custom block type, this is kind of an example of how to get a template for that. So the code is kind of hard to read. It's kind of confusing. I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but I felt it was kind of clunky. But I might try and find a better way to I don't know, clean it up. But that is how you would get a custom template for that. And the other situations where this comes into play, maybe you want a custom template for your user login page because you don't want to have your sidebars and your headers and all of that. So there's sometimes suggestions where you need a specific page to kind of break outside of the typical layout that you're working with. So that's where the hook theme suggestion, hook alters will come in. And Smacks and Bam is so now we're going to kind of get into, I guess, talking.
Who's read the book first? Who's read that Smacks book or looked up what BEM is and tried to? Good chunk of people.
Okay.
Cool.
So I think, I mean, I always feel like you need to implement some sort of philosophy. What one you do, or if you grab some from everywhere, and that's kind of what Drupal's done. We grab some from everywhere. As long as you're consistent and you're finding something that works for you, that's good. But we'll explain this in the Drupal context, and this is kind of what, I guess, what Core is doing and implementing. You could choose to completely ignore this in your theme if you want. I mean, you might have to work hard to be against it in some areas, but if you hate it, you don't have to use it. So the Smacks philosophy has pretty much been adopted from a folder structure perspective. And for CSS, this is specifically referring to how you put your CSS into folders. So your base styles would be anything that's a base HTML element. So, you know, an H1, H2, a block quote, a input field. So this is all things that basically wouldn't have classes associated with them. Layout is what you would use for your specifically your core page structure. Modules you'll see has been crossed out and renamed components because that's kind of Drupal's adaptation for this. If you read the book, it's referred to as modules. And components are kind of where the majority of your code goes. It's where an isolated block. So if you have like a login block, that would be a component. Or, you know, I don't know if you've heard like OOCSS is another concept where she talks about the media object, which is kind of like, you know, a picture, a date, and, you know, that type of kind of layout. That would be like a media component. Then there's the state, which is actually kind of quasi-used. I don't know, but it's basically affecting anything. It's basically outlining anything that's affected by JavaScript. And if you fully follow the Smacks philosophy, they get prefixed with an is. So, you know, if you have a class that's being controlled with JavaScript, it lets you kind of easily identify, you know, let's not style this one, let's just leave that one for JavaScript to play with. But I'm not a big fan of keeping it in a separate folder. I find it gets too disjointed, and I usually keep my states with my components. And then the theme is referred to anything that's like visual styling, and again, this one again is open to interpretation. Theme can be interpreted in a way that is, you know, color changes. Like you have one website, and then your theme files would be what would be justifying color changes. You know, if your user has the ability to toggle those or whatnot. And we'll go a little bit more into this and how it's, I believe, coming up right here. So there's some links there. And then this is how it kind of pertains to the library's YAML file. So in this structure, Drupal wants you to categorize them this way. So when you have your style sheets, you'll put them within the correct category as to where they belong. And what this helps you with is I guess, source loading. Your base elements will get loaded first, your layout second, your components, then your state, and then your theme. And that's how it's been written here, but if you kind of, you know, shuffle them around in a different order, it'll still follow that load order.
They're analogous to the weights in Drupal 7. If anybody is trying to put things in different parts with weights, they're mapped directly to weights. Weights still exist in Drupal 8. They're just, some of them are named so that we can kind of group them that way.
Can you do subfolders, and you define the subfolders just by, you know, indenting more in the YAML file?
This is simply calling the files. So, I mean, if you have a component in CSS /
Well, we didn't put the folders in here also because our slides would be too big.
Yeah.
We wanted to
But you could do it.
yeah, you should. Yeah, you can put
Yeah.
whatever folder. You don't even
Yeah.
have to put in the CSS folder if you don't want to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're
As long as it's in your
basically
theme
you're
somewhere.
basically
Yeah.
calling a CSS file and saying this is a base CSS file, this is a layout CSS file. And I mean,
Set some
it also
space
depends
on
on like
Yeah.
if you use Sass to compile everything. I mean,
So you can just have like styles.css and then
Check
Sass.
everything in theme and then
And
you're
then
done.
Sass
Yeah.
compiles everything that you've done.
yeah, if you want to let Sass do your compiling, you could have just one style sheet in theme. So yeah, you can take what you want and leave what you don't want, I guess.
So base layout component state theme, those are defined and hard coded somewhere, or
Yeah.
am I able to define my own other keys, or can I
I can't
shuffle
remember.
those around?
I can't
based on what I
remember.
wanna do?
Andrew, do you know?
I don't. I'm trying to remember how we implemented those.
I think they're hard coded and you have to use them.
There is a library example alter though, so that might be an option. Like,
You can you can still put weights if you want to them as well, and those will. So you can that curly bracket at the end allows you to put a bunch of the different options, and weights can be added in there too. So if you wanted to start messing around, you could do it that way. But we hard coded those categories, I think, into the YAML file reading. So I think it has to be in one of those categories. Like you can't even put it into like CSS. Those are the different categories there. You can't even just put it into CSS from what I
Or it has to be
remember.
in CSS dot.
Yeah, so that's why we're suggesting put it into a theme. It's going to load last, and it's probably the one you're going
I did test reorganizing these, and then I went and I looked at the source order, and the source order does respect those weights. So if you decide to put theme up top, it's not gonna listen to you unless you take the approach Joel said.
to. Weights.
Put your weights in.
Back to weights. So,
The YAML like array keys or whatever, like CSS base, those don't actually represent folder structure though, right?
No.
Those are just groups,
yeah, just groups.
arbitrary
Yeah.
kind of groups.
Named
Okay.
groups. Yeah.
So you could like not have that folder structure in your theme at all, and then
Right.
just load them in wherever you need to. Any questions about that one? So Smacks does kind of have a naming convention component to it, but from the Drupal perspective, naming conventions are very much in a BEM syntax, and for the purposes of Drupal, we're calling that SEM. So instead of block element modifier, because block carries such a heavy weight for us, it's component element modifier.
Yes, there's lots of talks that are called web components and things around that idea for like style sheets and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
if you're learning about that stuff,
Yeah.
components seems to make a lot more sense than naming it anyways.
Yeah, there's OO CSS, atomic CSS, set. Like there's more than dry CSS. So conceptually, there's lots of options to review.
Yeah.
So the naming convention for a class that belongs to one of your components would look something like this if you're following the BEM syntax. So the block name __ element name -- mod name. So for instance, if you have a search block, perhaps search would be your block name. Element name might be, I don't know, form item. Mod name might be active, I don't know, hover, error, something like that.
It's usually for variations. So
Yeah.
hyphen variation type thing.
Yeah, so
Something that
hence
changes.
modifier, M
Yeah.
for
They use
modifier.
like colors like red.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
like what they've done.
So what this gives you is, I mean, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but ultimately what this gives you is really strong classes that you know aren't going to be interfered with in other areas.
And if you
I was just going to say, we were talking about the content class. Like, how many
Yeah.
times have people been screwed over by the content class because they...
it's so generic and it could be anywhere on your site, and if somebody just puts some styles on the content class and they don't put it deep enough or it's nested in something else, like inside your block there's content class, and then maybe inside of that block there's another content class, and if you just do the first one, it's going to start styling the ones inside that block as well for your customers or stuff like that. So not fun.
So and ultimately what it lets you do is not nest so much, because when you have these super generic classes, we all know, oh, don't nest more than this many levels deep. Don't nest more than many levels deep. But when you have so many repetitive classes, it's really hard to get around. So this approach makes it much easier.
this is what we're doing in core. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It's just a suggestion. We kind of adopted that. If you don't like it, don't use it. But it's just, it's a nice way of handling it.
Just wondering, like, if we're using SAS, because SAS you can like a parent child. So
Yeah.
in that case, we probably don't need it because each division we can only determine by the parent.
Yes, but it could also
Yeah.
you can run into that same issue where you're on your page you put stuff inside of other stuff that has the same class name. If you don't use stronger class names, then you start running into conflicts, naming conflicts.
So I pulled up some examples. I grabbed some code from 7 and from 8, and you'll kind of start. Neither of my two examples. I couldn't find a perfect example of it.
Yeah, we don't do it very well in core, by the way.
So I found two examples that kind of do it. Show you two ways to do it, I guess. So the Drupal 7 menu, you'll see we're relying on that menu class, but then after that we're kind of relying on the LI to style. We really don't. If we want to style something on a consistent basis, we really don't have a repetitive style there that lets us lay that out. Which, I mean, the LI could work too. On the right-hand side, you'll see we have the menu wrapper, then we get a menu item class on each menu item, and then you're going to see that menu item -- active trail. So
You notice we didn't do proper BEM there. It
Yeah.
should be _ item, not what's going on.
Yeah. So ideally, this would be menu
notice that one just
_ menu item -- active trail. If it was pure BIM, I
Yeah.
guess.
Differing of opinions might have caused that.
Yeah.
I just forgot about
But wait till you see the next example. So.
it.
So the next example is tabs, and this is one that I always cursed was the double tabs. Like I had the tabs class on the wrapper and the tabs class on the UL. So that's not there anymore, which is nice. And then again, we're solely relying here on the LI class to provide additional styling. And then we got a bunch of, I don't know, some spans in there too.
So
With
tabs _ tab should be -- is active.
Correct.
Right.
And even the is active is more of a SMAX naming convention. So,
Oh, is that supposed to be JavaScript?
That would be your state type thing.
yeah.
Oh,
So I mean, maybe that's why
Yeah.
it took that approach. Like I was going through both, and I kept trying to find like the perfect example, but I couldn't find it. So.
They collide a little bit, SMAX and BEM. They kind of try to solve the same
Yeah.
problem. There are a couple different problems, but they collide in somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so we have a bit of that collision in core.
Yeah.
You can see it.
But you'll start to see this syntax, especially if you're using classy. You'll see this around. Not just so you know, it's all about providing you with more concrete styles. And
Debugging.
this is my favorite slide.
Twig debugging. So in our sorry, I'm over. There it is. Size default services.yaml. There's an option to turn twig debug to true. All this big text here tells you what it's doing for you. And when you turn that on and you clear the cache or rebuild the cache, you get stuff like this in your template. And you can actually do this in Drupal 7. We backported it. So it's called theme _ debug in your settings file. And it only works for templates, doesn't work for theme functions. But anyways, on every single template, it'll generate this information. It'll tell you all the different suggestions that you could possibly use for that template. Tells you what template's being loaded, puts a little X beside the template name that's actually being used for that suggestion, and tells you what the hook is called. The theme hook is called block in that case. So gives you a lot of information inside the template. And that way you can it's like, how do I change this piece of HTML? Well, that's the template that's loading, copy paste that into your theme, start changing it. Or if it's starting your theme, start changing it. So it's really handy. I like that a lot, and it's nice to see that in Drupal 7 as well. And we have, if you turn debug on, you get a dump function, comes from Twig. It makes it look like this. And that's kind of like var dump in PHP. It's almost the same. think it might even be the same. But if I need to see what's in this user variable that's actually in every single one, this is what you get. Passwords encrypted, so that's good. In the devel module, there's one called Kint, and it's just a nicer version, and everything's collapsible, kind of like your DPM in Drupal 7. And it also kind of separates things into available methods or static properties and stuff. So it's a little bit more useful, I think. And yeah, so there's this one. I think there's also maybe a Ladybug one. I'm not sure if anybody implemented that one yet, but there's a bunch of things that are out in the wild that people started grabbing onto and giving back to the developers in Drupal. So this is one that got into the devel module. And also, I like this tool. Drush is still my go-to tool for most of the stuff, but this is also being useful, helpful. It's called Drupal Console, drupalconsole.com. And this is just a GIF showing you how to install it, but it allows you to get the devel mode and get in your site without caches turned on and stuff like that really quick by just running the little command. So Drupal site mode will like turn off all my caches and put things into the right folders for me, and I do that instead of doing the manual things that settings PHP files does. So there's a whole bunch of options that it can do. It's a Symfony type of tool that works in the command line, and that just allows me to kind of get to a development mode quicker on my local machine. So I use that as well as Drush. And it actually has a thing in there for actually running Drush as well. So you can use this to run Drush for if you want. I don't know. Anyways, auto escaping. Scary one. This is something quite a bit new to not only Drupal, but any CMS. I researched when we were looking at turning this on. I was scared of turning it on. Very well should have been, because it held up Drupal 8 a little bit. But it allows us to prevent some XSS things, which are the most likely security holes that you get inside of a Drupal site. And this is actually something I found in my Drupal 7 site. I was using something like this to grab the username using entity metadata from the entity module, grabbing their first name, putting it on the screen saying welcome in the top bar. And somebody can put in that, and I tested that out while I was doing the auto escape conversion for Drupal 8. I tested that out on my site. I'm like, I wonder if I can do that. I checked that into the user first name of a user on my site, and sure enough, alert comes up on my screen saying I can has your site. So yeah, that sucked. So to do that properly, you want to checkplane it. That's HTML special characters for straight up PHP. That's what it is called in Drupal. I don't know why, but whatever. It's gone, so don't worry about it. In Drupal 8, it's a lot easier to get that thing in the first place. User.firstNameField.value, prints it out, it's escape by default. That will not give me an XSS attack. All variables are like that in Drupal 8. There's no CMS. I don't think there's any CMS that actually... There's frameworks that have auto escape turned on. It automatically takes the printed variable and wraps it in checkplane for you magically in the background. So don't have to worry about that part. And that's what it'll look like in your actual HTML. So they can't do stuff to you. Unescaping, the other side of this story, because of course, yeah, actually trying to get free of this stuff. This top one is not a really good example because it's an internal method and we're not supposed to use it. So don't use that one, but you can use it. And if you really need to make it's probably better to make your own than use the markup object. There's lots of instances in core of people making their own versions of this, and the T function is one of those. T actually returns an object now. It's a self-printable object, and it implements that, and therefore it's allowed to take markup. So if I actually put a little span tag inside of my T, and that last name will be escaped inside of it, but it will actually allow me to put that markup, that span tag, as a variable into my template. So it allows me to wrap basically I'm wrapping that variable in something that tells Twig that it's safe. Because otherwise, I'm Twig, I'm just going to escape it. And the other way here is probably the more recommended way is more render arrays. Unfortunately, we don't have like object-oriented way of building these little pieces of content, but maybe Drupal 9. But anyways, right now we have these render arrays, and we're using them to the nines. And markup, hash markup, or actually using a template would probably be better. The idea is to try to get the actual markup in the template, where it belongs, where your syntax highlighter will work, from your IDEs and your editors and stuff like that, and not put it into PHP. So this is kind of, if you wanted to actually put that span around that username or last name, put it in the template, put it around these little variables right here, and not try to put it inside of the variable. But there's always edge cases. That's why I'm showing this example. If you find yourself needing to actually pass markup from a variable into the template, you're going to need to implement one of these ways to get it into there. And your choice for how you're going to best do that, but recommended to use the actual render array. And the nice thing about this actual markup one too now is it still keeps you safe because it XSS filters the variable that's going in there automatically for that one. So it'll strip script tags, so you can't put script in that. I was actually porting a module, the OLARC module. It's like a chat system, and they have a big text area where you dump the JavaScript block right into it, and I had no way around it. And so for now, until I can find a better way to do it, I'm using the top one. But I'm probably going to get in trouble for that. So. And you can actually do this to link twig. It's not recommended. You should probably know where your variables are coming from, because if they are user variables, you could possibly introduce XSS attacks to your site if they're coming from a user. If you know where it's coming from, it's up to you, but it's just kind of not recommended. But you can still do this. Twig has this feature called type raw, which will get you the raw value instead of escaping it. And if you do that, you will be able to get that raw hacked script tag popping up on your site with the username. Questions? I went through that really fast. With the beer.
So it wasn't entirely clear.
Yeah.
As far as we know, we couldn't create another category for smacks.
Oh, so I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. But I think you can't. From what I remember, I was semi-involved in that issue. But yeah, I don't think you can. They're trying to recommend that you use Smack, so they force it on you that way.
But like you said, we could write our own structure, just have style, receive.css.
Yeah. And just check everything in theme.
That is broken.
Yeah.
So you could theoretically just have base, for instance, and everything in base.
Yeah.
Oh, not on the internet. This link here does link to the page where on Drupal.org where it all gets explained. And I'll post these in the meetup.
Is that the Drupal normalize? Or is that just an example that you put in there? We talked about this.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the actual takeaway was.
I think we decided to use our own, but this would be loading your own. I don't know.
But there is the existing name.
Yes.
Drupal
So
name.
much like with the other library, how we said core, load, jQuery. I think you could take that approach with normalize as well.
I think it's core/normalize or core/Drupal.normalize or something. But it's
You would still call it in your YAML file?
No, you wouldn't. This is explicitly putting it into that library, the global library as a base. So that's explicitly putting it there. You could actually load the cores version by just attaching that library in. Where is the too far? Yeah, libraries. It's probably back. Too far?
So yeah, this is why you want to use
The coffee mug.
Yeah. So you would put it. So I would, if I wanted to load normalize as well, I can actually put it there, and it defines where it's going to be put inside of its library on the core, and it'll be put in the base area. So it'll be put where we just put it before. But I would put I think it's, if I remember it, it's core / something. But you can find it by looking in all the definitions.
Similar to what you had with your Javas was the BX slider.
Mhm.
You had jQuery just as a dependency in that. What if you wanted it site-wide? Would you just put that as
You could add it right here if you want to.
Okay.
That's probably where I would add it. And it's separate if I really wanted to change it up later. This allows me to add it everywhere. That's probably where I put it.
Or like some other thing that's...
Yeah.
Okay.
Book page build is really for modules more than themes.
Okay.
But you could do it in there too. You could also do it anywhere along the render pipeline that you can attach things. Oh, I forgot to mention too, in Drupal 7 for suggestions, in Drupal 7, you couldn't actually attach things directly inside your preprocess. We tricked it out so that you can put a hash attached on the variables inside of your preprocess. So it's another place to attach things. And in Drupal 7, you actually had to put it on a render array that was being printed somewhere on the page. But if you don't actually, that template doesn't have any variables that are render arrays that would be printed on the page. You would have to like Drupal render it right there to get that stuff to show up because it needed to be printed somewhere or rendered somewhere. So in Drupal 8, you can actually just put it right on the variables, the $sign variables, square hash attached, and it just bubbles its way up. So lots of places you can attach things, and everything just bubbles up to the main HTML page, and either, depending on where you set your library, puts it in the header or the footer. And we also try to put more things in the footer in Drupal 8 because it's faster. You don't actually have to do DOM-ready stuff if you put things in the footer. So we try to, for speed, performance type stuff, we put it in
With the move to, what's called stable?
yeah.
With the move to stable, is that I was trying to understand a blog post I read a while ago talking about style sheets remove or some things.
I think we removed that.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So
I read that
that's-
the other day.
But you can alter and remove libraries. You can override libraries, existing libraries in core inside your theme. And I didn't put any of that in there. So
Okay, alright.
yeah, you can override it's just like the remove stuff. So if I wanted to, from a specific library, I wanted to remove just the CSS, I can actually alter it or override it and remove that. So.
And the process for a module providing a theme file and then you overriding it in your theme is the same?
Yeah.
You still just copy the file into your...
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Into your templates. There's a templates folder that we put everything in, so you can't really put it into roots, but you can put it anywhere you want inside your templates folder.
One of the interesting things I ran across is no inline JavaScript anymore.
Yeah.
It's probably going to trip people up.
Yes. That was also part of this OLARC thing that I was trying to figure out how I would be able to do something like there's no inline JavaScript, how do I do this? The people that were trying to do Google Analytics module were the ones mainly complaining about that one, but I should probably jump on that issue as well. I like it. It's better if you actually put your JavaScript in the file, but there's some cases where you need to build it up, and you need PHP variables to chuck in there. So I saw some people do some interesting things though for that. Scott Kotzer from London, Ontario, he was helping out port a module, and they put the JavaScript itself into a template, twig template, and so those variables that they wanted to were twig variables, and they printed those inside of the thing. And then they just attached that to the page that they were trying to do and passed the variables into it. I can't remember what thing that they did that for. Something like respond JavaScript or something. But anyways, that was an interesting way to do it. You're using the template. Templating language is a template file for JavaScript instead of HTML, which is what we're doing for most of the stuff.
That issue is in desperate need of reasonable people to come in and say, I need this feature for reason X, because to date it has been Haas, who's a
just
Google
Haas,
Analytics maintainer, bitching at everyone about how horrible his life is and how he's up.
Yeah.
So if you have a reasonable need for that feature, it'd be great to have some like.
I know you're talking about inline script tags.
Yeah,
essentially.
inline script tags.
But it just seems like every single third-party plugin that uses JavaScript basically requires you to put an inline JavaScript.
I
All
agree.
this awful nonsense that the clients want, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what
We
yeah.
got this from marketing. You put it in the head.
Yeah,
we got
exactly.
you should see this one HTML.php file we have.
So I encourage all of the reasonable people in this room to go to that issue and please comment on it because it's a quagmire of payment sites.
You're really
I mean, it's awesome because
Well,
there's so many
Why was it
great-
taken out?
It's I can't remember the exact reason, but there is probably like it gets abused a little bit too much. People kind of rely on it a little bit too much, and they use it improperly. There's probably some good use cases. My use case, I found a way around it, and it's probably for my better purpose to do it the way that I did it than to do inline JavaScript that I was originally starting to do. So it made me think about that a little bit better and come up with a better solution. But in my case, but there is probably some really legitimate cases. It's just that those haven't been really made. Those cases for having it haven't been really made, and there was a better, stronger case for not having it. So that's why it got
The
removed.
better, stronger case for not having it is cacheability, because if your page is like static and you know everything ahead of time, which in Drupal 8 we cache everything by default for fast by default, then you can serve the page in milliseconds. But if there's one part of the page that's dynamic and you've no idea, then it kills the entire cache for that section.
That was
So
part of the
it's-
reason why I had to do it the way
so
I
it's
did
a
it.
deliberate decision to make it hard to do inline JavaScript. We don't provide an API for it.
And you learn about caching.
Yes.
Which I didn't put in this talk on purpose, but I'm learning about it, and it's pretty cool, but at the same time also freaky scary.
But there's nothing stopping you from putting a script head in your page template, right?
Right.
No.
Like, if you've got some silly third-party tracking tool that the client wants you to put in there, and it's a static piece of JavaScript in a script head,
Yep.
you just throw that in your
And that's the
HTML document,
recommendation
right?
on the change record.
Yeah,
for
right,
sure.
okay. Well, that kind of makes sense to me. I mean, I get where the Google Analytics guy's coming from, because
He's getting
he's
that in his
dynamically building that
module.
snippet based on your configuration.
Yeah, on a config page, and that config variable needs to somehow get into the template.
Maybe those modules shouldn't exist.
That's why I was using that markup create actually. So that's my cheating way around it. So.
should have put a text area that you copy and paste.
Well, why do you need like a full form to output a snippet that you could just configure within the Google Analytics interface anyway? It's gonna just produce a static.
The actual site that like for Olark, for example, they give you the snippet, so they're gonna. I don't want to have to tell, and it includes in the script tag. There's some kind of thing that I'm not sure if it'll actually affect the JavaScript or not, but it's on the actual thing. So I would have to like explain to my users to rip that part out of it, and then put in only the body of the script, and then type in somewhere else on a different field what those attributes were, or something silly, instead of what they tell on their site. Copy this, paste it to your website, you'll be done. And so I don't think it would be reasonable on my customer, my users, to use that. So I did what the Drupal 7 did, was here's a big thing, dump it in there and you're good.
Right.
So,
The inline JavaScript does have a security aspect to it. Is there's a new HTTP header that allow you to say only allow the browser to load JavaScripts from a particular domain, a particular site.
Right.
And you can tell it to not include inline JavaScript. So that'll cut out any cross-site scripting attacks completely, because the browser will just go ahead and run this.
Yeah.
And it'll even disallow someone from allowing a JavaScript some sort of site.
Is that like the trusted host thing in the settings file you're talking about, or is that different?
It's a little different. But yeah, so you can say, I only want files that are loaded locally or from this content delivery network.
Right.
And anywhere else will be blocked. So
Block
it's better
Facebook.
JavaScript security.
block all Facebook. Twitter and all that. All third-party integrations block.
Write it yourself.
Any other questions?
Thanks for coming out, everyone.
In terms of the start click scene, we know that in Drupal like extend like Zen or something. Is it a scene we recommend as a start click like Drupal 8 like a good start?
Basic.
I'm making basic work in Drupal 8. It's not quite finished, but it actually does work right now. If you wanted to do that one, it's basic. It's nothing, and you copy it and do whatever you want with it. It just gives you a starting point. It's a starter kit type thing. I'm helping with that one. Leah's helping out with that one, and Catherine's helping out with that one. Yeah, you're helping, and Steve sometimes. But there's a few out there. I'm not sure which ones are ready for Drupal 8 yet. So I can't recommend any at the moment. But you can help port Drupal 8's themes that exist already, and you'll learn at the same time.
This sounds like it's going to be really, really good when Bootstrap is finally done for me, because Bootstrap is like durable in 7 and things like that.
Yeah, I was supposed to help those. Yeah, supposed to help Bootstrap.
Where's that?
Bootstrap's going to work
Yeah, this is a good opportunity.
I'm really hoping to see in Bootstrap it says base theme equals stable. Because if they say classy, it's like, why the hell did we do this separation in the first place? So I'm really hoping that that's what they do. And same with Foundation.
Yeah.
So we did it for their benefit. So I'm hoping.
When you like create basic, when you were developing it, you start with stable, create your own classes on everything, and yeah.
Yes.
Because typically with Basic, we had a whole bunch of pre-processed hooks, like stripping classes out.
Right.
So if you have a base theme that is stripping a bunch of classes out, you should probably be starting with stable.
And there's a lot less pre-process calls. And in Drupal 8, I would almost say you shouldn't even have to be in the pre-process in 99% of the case. And I almost stripped out all of them, every single pre-process inside of Basic that was inside of Drupal 7. I stripped out every single one and put all the stuff that necessarily was needed in there into the template. So I don't need those
In
pre-processes.
theory, you're just
It was
rendering the
like- it
mustache,
was like a-
whatever, right?
Yeah.
How many lines was template.php?
Yeah, I don't know. A few hundred.
A lot.
Yeah. This much.
No, it's like five lines? No?
Yeah, it's 5 lines, and I think I could probably move those out too. I removed a couple more, so it's only one pre-process left, and a few variables in there that I might not need to put in there. So that'll be fun.
We can download that now, right?
Yeah.
That's
Do we have is it fully released?
No. Well, it might be a dev release.
If you,
It's a dev.
we should probably do another one.
Yeah.
A new one.
Yeah.
Joel can roll.
Well, the dev release is every time I commit, it's there. So
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but the actual release where it says Alpha 1 or whatever, I don't think we did that yet.
Don't use that.
It's built every 6 hours.
Yeah, every time I commit it. No.
Is Alpha 1 the one that still has a whole bunch of PHP template in it?
Yes.
Oh, there is actually an Alpha 1.
Alpha.
There was an album.
Okay, so it's still there and it has a bunch of features. So you can see the halfway there point if you want to look at what it was kind of and how we got to where we are now. So
That's when Drupal was still in alpha. Or Drupal 8 was still in alpha.
yeah. So okay, we'll cut another.
Is theme building from scratch a lot easier then because of that?
Yes, because you don't have to think about Drupal render or if it's an array or not. It's printing for
Yeah.
both cases.
Like, take a chunk of HTML and just print stuff versus
Yeah, you're getting a bunch of
make your own
variables.
HTML template.
I want to wrap
template.
them in some template tags.
And I find that the more you get into having a componentized philosophy, the more you want full control over everything. So this and especially with a BEM naming convention, and if you want to follow something consistent, you want to be defining your own classes.
We are using stable as a base theme for that one. So we're not yet. At least one person. I just haven't looked at Bootstrap or Foundation, but stable's intended for those guys. So hopefully they use it too. And I'm pretty sure I will be using it in my own stuff, like extending from stable, because I want to not have the classes that Drupal has, and I want to build them up. I might take stuff from Classy that looks handy, but for the most part, I'm going to do all the classes myself, so I can have control over them. Maybe fix some of the things like menu hyphen item or something like that.
Stable as a theme option.
Was that?
Is stable as a theme option?
Yeah, as a base theme.
Base theme
So it just has the templates and whatever was core when it was released, whatever was out coming from all the core modules was copied into stable.
Yeah, if you look at Bartik's info file, you'll see it says base.
At least in Classy.
Yeah, but it says classy. So basic right now doesn't have one defined because we're just falling to stable.
Oh, that was way too far. little too expensive now. They're stable.
But you can like go to the Drupal 8 admin and click on like I want to use stable, or
Oh,
does
no.
it nothing.
It's,
Like it doesn't
no.
print anything.
It doesn't even show stable. In there.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
Your core modules still provide their own templates though, and then you're just overwriting them in stable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right.
We copied all the templates from those core modules into stable, so that we would have like everything solid, the same. Start still exists, so if you want to look at what core is, ever. Mostly for testing though. If you want to test something out, or you want to test what core is doing, that's what you'd use. Yeah.
Do you hate stars?
I do. Yeah. I tried to say get rid of it. And I don't know. I don't see its purpose. Yeah. Base theme false is the same what Stark does. So you just say base theme false, you see what Stark sees.
Interesting.
Good.
Alright, if you guys want to stick around, we're going to head over to Steamworks after. If you guys can fold up your chairs, put them to the side, and thanks again to the speakers.